Welcome to The Edge, the podcast about everything leadership and teams. I'm Jenny Miller. I'm one of the co-founders of Management Dynamics and the co-host of this podcast. Here today with Alison Grieve. Ali, do you want to say hi?
Hi, I'm Alison Grieve. I'm the other co-host of this podcast and also a founding member of Management Dynamics. And it's such fun to be here today. We've got a wonderful guest for you today. She is the host of the Human Greenhouse, a really exciting podcast, and she'll share with you some information about that. But not only, she is a world-class facilitator, an extraordinary coach, psychotherapist, leader, and of course a podcaster. So Tatjana Harttung is here to share her experience on a range of topics, but dear to our heart, they all somehow link into what we believe is important for us all in terms of resilience. So we're going to be talking about what it's like to be a human and how do we sustain ourselves in the world that we're in, and other things. So let me introduce you. Welcome, Tatjana. Tell us about yourself.
Thank you. What a welcome. My God. No, thank you so much. Yeah, about myself, there's always one of those hardest questions to answer, isn't it? When I have guests on my podcast, it's the question that people sort of say, ooh, what am I supposed to say? But essentially, I've been in the coaching, learning and development, talent space for forever. I love it. It's where my passion lies. I'm a wife, I'm a mother, I'm Danish by birth. I've lived kind of all over the world. And essentially, I guess I just hold space. I try to hold space for people in different constellations. And yeah, that's kind of me. And I'm a Star Wars nerd. Did I share that as well?
I didn't even know that, Tatjana.
You did not know
I didn't
that.
know that.
How did I not know that about you?
I don't
Do you
know
go
why we
to
haven't
the
talked
Star
about this.
Wars? Do you go to the Star Wars conferences and things then, Tatjana?
I haven't yet, but I have a friend who went to the Seattle Comic-Con recently, all decked out, and I think I might need to join her at some point. But yes, I am a sci-fi Star Wars geek. So there's something
Already
I
learned
didn't
something
know.
new about you. Yeah.
So yeah, that's a little bit about me. It gets quirkier as we keep talking.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your podcast and the premise underpinning it.
Yeah, absolutely. So the podcast is very much about how can we show up differently? What are some of the ways that we can find courage and possibility to take a stand, to live more from a wholesome perspective. And it was also a wish to give a voice to people that are maybe not always naturally invited onto different podcasts. So it's in its first season in the autumn here. It's fairly eclectic mix of people that are making a difference and living a more regenerative or sustainable path in the spheres that they operate in. And it's just a lot of fun. It's a creative space. It's a space where listeners can tap into the website as well and ask questions. So it's a way to build conversation and community around a more regenerative way of being and finding some ideas. Yeah.
Tell us a bit about you talk about regenerative leadership.
Yeah.
In conversations we've had before, and you've just mentioned the word regenerative in relation to your podcast. Could you tell us a bit more about what that is, and in particular how it relates to leadership and teams?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah. It's one of those words that, for a long period, nobody said the word, nobody talked about it. And then all of a sudden it became one of the buzzwords. But essentially, if you think about going from kind of a conventional space or a more extractive space, and then there's been movements to going more green, being sustainable. And sustainability, most people understand what that means, right? It's kind of maintaining what there is. A more restorative or regenerative approach is to look at the system as a living system, right? An ecosystem. Could be a family, a team at work, an organization, an NGO, a country, a place in the world, and looking at how do we keep it, how do we help it continue to regenerate itself, right? How do we make it better than we found it? How do we keep evolving and building and strengthening and nurturing that? And understanding that there is a need to breathe more life into it. And how do we do that, right? And using some living systems principles around that, to make sure that we understand that everything is connected, everything is interrelated. So we're not stronger than the system, we're part of the system, right? And the system is not just us necessarily. It's also, if you talk about an organizational standpoint, how are we as an organization impacting our outer environment, right? Are we recycling our waste properly? Are we, do we have good due diligence around suppliers? We're not using child labor, we're not being discriminatory, all those sort of things. So it's really thinking about how can we do better and not just more, and how can we not extract and destroy what's already there. But it is a bit of a buzzword, and you could say holistic or wholesome or 50 million other things, because I think there's a risk with it that it becomes just a word, but it does require us to do things differently.
So it sounds, in a way, it's a different mindset that we're talking about here for people to start to take more factors into consideration as part of their decision making, and to have a wider perspective of whatever problem or thing that they're working with.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a great sort of sense of, because the system is considered to be a living system, a dynamic system, as we know teams are as well. There is a need to be fully present, to sense and respond, and also to not be afraid that the system will change and mold and evolve as we go. And to see that there are some edge effects, on the edges of the system. There will be people inside a system that can affect it more than others, but that there is really nothing to fear in that. But we have to be awake and we have to be intentional about it. So it is to also kind of follow the flow of the system. Very often, the sense of, in business today, many businesses, it's perpetual summer. That's not realistic and it's not sustainable. If we could lean into a more cyclical approach, right? Understanding when to prepare for things to bloom in the spring. It doesn't have to be the seasonal spring, but the concept of spring. What can we, what can be abundant and flourish during, a summer? When we're harvesting in the autumn, what do we need to put away for storage? What do we need to seed, to keep? How do we nurture the soil of an organization or a team? And if we're wintering, what does that mean in terms of taking a time out, resting, recalibrating, restituting, and how does that serve the team or the organization further down the line? So thinking in more kind of natural cycles, as opposed to everything being done in the winter months, as very often happens in organizations, right? There's no daylight in the Northern Hemisphere and everybody's working 12-hour days, which becomes interesting.
Yeah, and from a kind of a resilience perspective, that's a not very sustainable approach, is it? There's something there about the words that came to my mind as you were saying that was feast or famine. With the seasons analogy. And actually, you can't get through the winter if you haven't prepared effectively. And actually, that is time to rest and recoup and to hibernate a bit if needed. And what I heard in what you were talking about in all of that was that mindset requires really deliberate action, that you need to be thinking much bigger picture, and rather than just doing and cramming as much as you can into those 12-hour days, you need to be thinking about the impact that action has on your team, on yourself, on the suppliers, on the system that you're a part of, the wider ecosystem that you are impacting as well. And the deliberate action piece it sounds like it's really important in all of this.
Absolutely. And that's also what's implied in the sort of sense and respond, right? Is that we have to really sense into the system, or into the team, or into whatever it is. I mean, we're talking from a business perspective here, but it could also be a family or a community. And looking at what does the system need? What do we want it to be for it to thrive and continue to evolve? What does that require of us? So it's very much this piece of kind of divergence and convergence, right? We need to zoom out, get the big picture. We also need to zoom in on individual parts, and be intentional with what is the smallest action or change that's going to have the most impact. Mama Nature tends to do things in small incremental steps, and then once in a while we get a big event. But if you look at nature's wisdom, Mother Nature does things in small, very strategic steps. And very often, more is not necessarily better in that regard. It might be one thing that's going to move the needle on something that we want to change. So yeah, it is a different mindset, because we're also going to have to let go of our sense of the more we do, the more quote unquote productive we are, the better it is. And there's nothing wrong with productivity. There's nothing wrong with profit. There's nothing wrong with, healthy bottom lines. None of that is the case. But to be intentional with what is going to serve the system, not just in the next quarter for shareholders, but longer term. And that is maybe one of the barriers to this, right? Is that there's a lot of more short-term thinking, and some of it for good reasons. But there's also a longer lens that can be applied, that tends to be a more sustainable one.
And that's something I think that we've found in teams as well, is that a very short term need to get these tasks done, these projects, this work done.
Yeah.
And, getting people to think longer term. If you think about somebody's own career and their own personal development, for example, they need to have a kind of perspective of other wider, longer term things, because you need to join up the dots somehow. But there's stuff you can do now, but it's the small steps now, and they all add up. And I also wonder about, because some people worry about, I haven't got a long-term vision for what do I want to be when I grow up? I've got no idea. But there must be some sort of thinking about, it could be this or this. And so what would be some way forward? And I think as a coach, advising and supporting people to think about, the evolutionary, I love that, Mother Nature next steps to take, but it's part of a bigger whole to open up possibilities and options. What's your thoughts as we share that?
No, absolutely. And in that, thinking about what do I want to be when I grow up. I am one of those people, by the way, and I am definitely grown up. But I have that sense of, what's the next thing, or what else is there? There's that sort of curiosity learner mindset there that, is a blessing, and sometimes, less so, because we tend to get overexcited about things, right? But I think that if you can, and I often talk to coachees about this, if you can have a sense of your own soil, if we just use the sort of language of the land, right? If you can have a sense of your own soil, of your own rooting, where are you anchored from a belief and value perspective? What is your true north as a human being? Not as a worker who's in a corporate environment, but what is the legacy that you might, if I was talking about you after you've gone, what would you want me to say about you? So if we can have a sense of, our own direction of journey, I think that that's enough. Because if we get too super controlled about things, then I also think we risk what's at the edges that maybe we hadn't imagined. I know I can't imagine everything, right? That is likely. And I think if people can be more open to, transformation, change, evolution is a natural part of being in nature, of nature, and a human being. And we don't need to fear it. We just need to be open to what are the possibilities and choices I have to make as things evolve for me, and to be more okay with that. I think that would help people get anxious about, I have to be something particular. And if you want to go for world fame, absolutely, do your thing. But maybe there's another path that is equally rewarding and nurturing for you.
And that piece around change, I think, is so crucial to resilience. There's something really important in there about when people are often at their least, or maybe not their least resilient, but their least amount of energy, or they're feeling most burnt out, is when change is happening around them or to them or to others, and they're kind of, experiencing the side effects of that. And so I think that as a result, people really fear change and they worry about it happening, and then they're not, then they kind of see their energy levels really drop, and they find it really hard to kind of get back up to where they and recover. And that's, I think, the essence of resilience, isn't it? Being able to bounce back from that. But why do you think people fear change so much in the first place? What is it in our human psychology that just makes us go, no, things need to stay the same?
I think it's a number of different things. I think that, if we go back, and scientists talk about this, we live as modern creatures, but in reality, our brains have not evolved that much outside of having to survive and watch that tiger on outside. I think change is for many people something that feels scary, because there's a lack of control. It's unpredictable. We don't know the outcome. We don't understand our own position in it. So there's this risk of loss of limb, loss of identity, loss of position, and meaning and acceptance and community, right? We are social beings. So I think for a lot of people, the change fear is about, will I somehow not be allowed to be here anymore? Will I get, sent away, or I won't be part of the team, or I won't understand what's going on? So I think there's lots of elements. We're also socialized into fitting in. Children do whatever they feel like. They roll around in the mud, they climb trees until we tell them that it's dangerous. Mind you, don't fall down. So I think that there's also socialization of, in order to be a good student at school, or, a good member of the family, we have to somehow create some boundaries and edges around ourselves. A lot of these are healthy because they're part of being communal. Some of them also mean that we fear stepping outside of those. And I think that is what happens even to very self-aware, mature leaders, that they go, whoops, at a very visceral level, something feels existentially threatened. And it might not come up as that, but I think it's definitely there, that we fear the sort of expulsion or solitude or being wronged or being shamed even. I think that there's a lot of it. And change is messy. I mean, we've all tried that, right? Life hits you in the middle of the faith and you go, what the, and you have to somehow find, that bounceability. What can I do right now? What can I be grateful for? I'm not alone. Who's around me that can support me, or, tell me to pull myself together, or whatever it is. And I think we have to be intentional about having those people in our lives that do all of those things and be those people and not be afraid of it.
Yeah, and I think that there's some people who are much more comfortable with change and like to. There's something as well about initiating change yourself and being on the receiving end of change too. But I think there's some people who embrace change more than others. And what can we do?
Ali?
Well, I love change, so I get
Change
bored
magnet.
very easily. I also recognize sometimes there can be the shock of it as it comes in, and then you go, woo, yes. But I think there's something there about what we need to do to support people to become more comfortable with change, even the small pieces of it.
Yeah.
And, for us, when we look at our framework with teams and working with people, enabling them to get to higher levels of performance, whether it's individuals or teams or organizations, it is about how do you set yourself up to embrace and look for change and ways to be ready for whatever's going to come. And use each other, create a community, because, when you were little, you didn't just do it on your own. You learned from other people, and, children get picked up by their parents when they fall over and they keep trying and having a go. So there's something about creating that community to encourage and support people, even in the small bits of change, I think. And sometimes that's lacking, especially, you know, in our society where we hear that people are more likely to be lonely and isolated. And I also wonder in organizations if we see that through silos that get created when actually you should be having more conversation happening across. Is that resonating with you too?
No, that's for sure. That's resonating very deeply with me, because I think, you know, the more we compartmentalize things and teams, communities, you know, it means we can go here, but we can't go over there. And a living systems approach is very much about no, because everything is interconnected. There will be interdependency. There will be resource. There will be people who either say yes or no. So raising awareness of that, I think, is one of the ways to give people more sense of agency around change. But, you know, we also have to be able to practice. There's that sort of, you get it right first time or you're out. That is not how evolution works, right? It is a process of experimentation. As long as we can understand what are the boundaries and the performance criteria that we can have around this as an organization or a team, that means that we can fail fabulously for a few times, and then we do need to get it right because the budget's a finite thing. I think also allows people to lean into that more creative space where we can, you know, be innovative and experiment. And then I think we do have to take responsibility individually and collectively. You know, if people are sleepwalking through their own lives or through their team life, they need to wake up from that. And that doesn't mean that you have to be okay with all sorts of change that's coming at you, but be awake, be aware, understand your mandate, where you can have agency and where you need to ask for help. And then I think, because that's also a compassionate thing, right? Compassion for self, compassion for the others. What is my role in this team, for instance? What is the uniqueness that I bring as a person, as a professional? And does the rest of the group understand that? Are we talking about that? What I need to do in a broader context to maybe help, you know, with change. Change can be small things, you know, and it can be the big, you know, earth-shattering stuff. But I think as human beings, I think we're wired for change. If you looked at the COVID lockdown globally, I mean, as horrendous as that was in many ways, people found a way. Most people found a way, right?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, there was a lot of sick people there. But there was also, I think, a wake-up call to virtual working. What are we doing to our planet? Okay, my neighbor's lonesome, hasn't been outside, can't go shopping. I think there was an awakening of something that actually longer term is probably a good thing.
Yeah.
You mentioned sleepwalking into things. I think that really resonated with me, because I think that, I mean, I've slept walked into a lot of stuff that's kind of, and it kind of hits you between the eyes when you suddenly realize, oh my goodness, I've created this situation and I didn't even notice that was what was going on. And how do I now undo that? And I think it just brings it back to that piece around deliberate action, being really clear about what you're trying to achieve. In terms of your work life just generally. You know, we don't have a work life and life in general, right? There's something there about designing your own life and therefore how you approach work, and how important it is. I think it's a message for all of us around that sleepwalking into things. But I think it's even more important from a leadership perspective, because actually you're potentially leading your people into a place where it's hard to get out of again. So in terms of their resilience and how you set up your team and how you lead your team to be a resilient, sustainably productive team, I just think that deliberate action thing becomes so crucial, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And that piece of, you know, designing your own life and being intentional with that, I think is something that we can all take to heart. You know, I think without any exceptions, everyone has tried sleepwalking into something. And part of that is convenience or ease or shortage of time or resources, or that was what there was on offer, you know, whatever, loads of different things. But I think that is the, you know, being awake thing of saying, how can I design for myself and for others so that it is, that it thrives, right?
Yeah.
And how can I bring that conversation in? If you think about some of the stuff that goes on in kind of regenerative leadership spheres, it's very much this piece around biomimicry, like looking at where is nature wise in her design, but also thinking, bringing design thinking into it. How can we be more visual? How can we be more playful? How can we look at how other forms of organizations are getting together and organizing work, for instance? Would that work for us? And also remembering that the journey that we're all on through this life, and this is going to make me sound like new age priest. That's not the intention here. Have a little fun, people, right? Being joyful and hoping for potential and designing for thrivability doesn't mean you're less ambitious, doesn't mean that you're lax or not taking things seriously. So I think a lot of this is also about maturity of ourselves, maturity of the people that we hang out with in different team constellations. Be aware of it's okay to hold multiple perspectives and multiple emotions, right? I can get incensed about something that's on TV, but that doesn't mean I turn around and shout at my family. That's for a different time. So I think that there is that piece of how can I design, and maybe even saying it loud in teams when we talk about resilience. How do we design this so that this is good for everyone involved?
Whilst the thing that was kind of jumping into my mind when you were saying all of that was, Tatjana, was without necessarily needing to know exactly what the end point looks like. There's something about being emergent with all of this as well, isn't there?
Oh, emergence. Yes.
And I think that's an important part of resilience is, yes, it kind of helps to broadly know roughly where you're going, but also taking the opportunities that present themselves as they show up and creating your own opportunities out of nothing can also be important in this. So not needing to be too rigid about what that outcome might be, I think is really powerful, isn't it?
Yeah, there's something about emergence, right? I read somewhere, and I'm trying to remember where it was, but a lot of indigenous cultures, and this was a reference to the Native Americans of America, North America. This piece of teaching children to observe and listen and sense and not jump into doing something. That's also emergence thinking. What is the system doing around me? What am I sensing, feeling, observing? What's coming at me? What is my own presence, my own energy in the system doing, right? I think if more people could also be aware of what is the energy that I'm bringing to the room. I mean, we know that when we coach, don't we? Sometimes a coachee comes on, whether it's live or it's on the phone, and you have to ground them. Sometimes you have to help them breathe because it was a busy day. And sometimes they're sitting with an energy of something that has either happened or is going to happen, and they're not present. So emergence is also being present, truly present, breathing, relaxing, observing, don't flop, but just, a bit sort of, I guess, Zen Buddhist-ish. Whatever that looks like in corporate life, right? Get 2 minutes on that one. And that can be scary, right? I mean, I've tried this with teams, is you start with breathing exercises and they think you're extremely woo-woo and out there. And yet afterwards you get little messages saying, actually, that was really nice. I should remember to do that a bit more. Yeah, because it's good for you and it's good for the team.
Yeah.
So emergence is not necessarily a bad thing.
And I think we see that a lot. I mean, I recognize it in myself and Jenny as well, and our team, the culture of busyness and how, we're all on this hamster wheel, running around, getting lots done. And it's good to be busy. And that sometimes feels in conflict with that more emergent Zen moments, even when that's what you should do. That sort of it's like a polarity almost, where you kind of know that would be good for you, but you've got so much to do, and there's some kind of benefit. I don't know what it is. About
well, we see the benefit, don't we, Ali, around being pressure prompted. That we recognize that that's a personality trait we both have.
Yes.
We're very different in many other things, but that's one of the things we do share is a real that's when we do our best work, when we have a tight deadline and it's feeling really and the pressure promptedness is something that we really respond well to, and that's when we shine. And that's not how everybody works.
No, but you know that there's something about that, isn't there? Because I remember going to an art class one time, and the teacher who was running the class said, "There's nothing worse for an artist than unlimited time and white paper." And there's something about having some boundaries to time and options. So not all urgency or, you know, the sort of pressureness of you know, limited time is a bad thing. You know, if my house was on fire, I can't run around and be all Mother Nature loves me and relaxed. I have to get water and put it out or call somebody. So urgency in itself, I don't think that is a bad thing. That is a human condition that we can move really fast when we need to, right? But if that becomes the only valid way of showing up, then reflection, recalibrating, stillness, quiet becomes something that is associated with non-productivity, non-doing, laziness, lack of focus, you name it, right? You could put 10 labels on that. So just as we talked about, I think years ago, that, you know, the business world was very much built for the extroverts. It was hard to be an introvert. I think there's another piece here around, yes, it isn't, you know, maybe overwhelmingly we're built for, you know, time urgency generally, and kind of doing stuff. And those that are more reflective or spend more time in the sort of being zone, that's not always recognized as being valuable to the whole. So maybe there's something there. But also understanding who are you impacting, right? And I think I know that you guys are aware of that, right? Who are you impacting in your own ecosystem that's going to go, holy moly, they're off again.
We're not pressure prompted, and here we go again on this.
Again. And that's sensing the whole system, isn't it? Of saying, okay, what can be, you know, preloaded, postloaded.
And it's sometimes, you know, I think we also have to think about, and we do, you know, some of the mechanisms we bring in to try and manage that pressure promptedness is a project plan, for example, where we're planning out to a day, and then you create some little milestones along the way that manage the you know, the potential overwhelm for the team and the client, of course, as well. So there's mechanisms that we put in place, and I think you're absolutely right. I think we do need to watch that desire for busyness that could, because of what we enjoy it, and it kind of gives us energy, and there's something in there, Ali, I don't know what it is. What does it give us?
Well, it does. It gives us that energy, the adrenaline. It gives you a sense of satisfaction. Like, look, we've done it. We finished it, all of that. But I think there is those moments that, you know, even the most pressure prompted, high energy, active day to day gets relief from a moment to step back and just think about, what is it I've done and where do I want to go next? You know, and I know also that teams really relish having that space and time to sort of think about, what is it that we're doing and what is really important to us and where do we want to go? So I think it's not just individuals. I think teams, organizations need those moments to sort of step out and get perspective, prioritize. And then I think that enables you then to step into those busyness moments and sort of a bit like river rafting, really. You know, you get your instructions before you jump on and then off you go. And it's great fun. But, you know, you then need to step out and plan for the next bit, and then you can do it. And I think in a way that's how Jenny and I work. You know, we have these moments where we get all this clarity and thinking. But if we were to do that all year long, we'd both be like, whereas you know, then we get into it, but actually there's moments where you need to come back out and go, so what next? but it's making sure you have those balance of the times. Giving teams, leaders, individuals time to think about, what next and how did that go, and that reflection. Otherwise, the balance and the resilience is not going to be sustained.
And the thing I notice is, if we bring this back to the teams context, is teams often say, when we talk about high performance and what they need to be high performing, they often say, oh, when we had that crisis, we were at our best.
Yeah.
We all came together. COVID was a lovely example where so many teams just went, we knew exactly what we needed to do and we all came together and we just solved the problem. Why can't we have that now when there's no crisis? Or we create, what I often see happening is they create an artificial crisis or a real crisis out of nothing to get back to that place. And so there's something there about, but the other thing that I notice is also, however, if it's always pressure prompted, the collaboration doesn't happen as naturally because people get a bit more stressed and get a bit more, I've just got to get this done. I don't have time to go and engage with my colleagues and work together with other people on this thing. Or if I do, I've probably left it to the last minute and therefore it feels very unfair on them.
Exactly. Yeah.
So there's a whole... there's a balance to be had somewhere in this, isn't there, where we use it a bit more deliberately, that pressure promptedness.
Definitely. And I think it's worth remembering that as sentient beings that we are, when we are under stress, the body physiologically doesn't distinguish between good stress and bad stress. We know that good stress is good for us in the sense that it keeps us sharp, keeps us focused, all of those things. But the longer we are in high adrenaline, high cortisol environments, the shorter our cognitive bandwidth becomes because we have to focus. It becomes a survival thing. So the more we do that, the less creative we are, because creativity also lives in spaces where there isn't a threat. So it's if we're constantly, the body and the nervous system is thinking that we're under threat, and that is what crisis management leadership looks like, right? Then that becomes a way of being, to the point where not being in that state feels really scary because people's adrenaline levels start to drop, right? That's why people that are very high adrenaline fueled, they go on holiday, they have a sore throat. It's because the body's releasing all of that. So the balance is thinking about, when can we be super focused, super, high adrenaline, have fun with it, really go for it, sprints, agile creative workshops, whatever. But like Olympic athletes, we also need restitution, rest, sleep, fun, whatever we do when we're not working. Definitely. Yeah.
So what about the collective intelligence? How does that fit into enabling us to solve some of these complex problems and deal with the future, but together?
Sure. I think if we think about where we are in the world and this time, and I'm sure every generation has that question, right? That's almost existential of every generation lives in a particular or in a special time. I think collective intelligence is understanding and appreciating that I will never, as an individual, know all of it, and because I'm affecting the field that I'm part of, the collective intelligence shows itself when we are working together, right? Essentially when we're collaborating. And there might be pockets where something's going on that isn't necessarily visible to the whole system, but actually is a piece of collective intelligence in the system. And that is because everything is interconnected. I mean, we know that by now. That it's scientifically proven, in so many different ways. But if we sit in our little compartments and stay there, then we're harnessing the intelligence of that little bit, but we're not appreciating what comes into the system or flows out from our little system into the wider thinking. So there's something about the connectivity and understanding, what is the communication and the exchange of knowledge that goes on. If you think about, if we use a natural metaphor, mycelium networks, there's been a couple of books or several books published around, the intelligence of trees. They are using the mycelium network as a communication channel. with nourishment and signals, even to the point where trees can tell each other that there's danger, too many birds eating the fruit, they send out toxins. So there's something about understanding what is the root system and the mycelium that we have that actually helps us to harvest and understand the collective intelligence. There's something about when we work in silos or even in subject matter departments, I think we can become a bit blind to our own craft, right? I used to be in HR, and in HR, of course, we knew exactly how we wanted things. And then you get a leader from supply chain somewhere saying, how about this bit? And all of a sudden there's more intelligence in the room because, yeah, good point. That was a different way of looking at it. So I think we can take care to also look at collective intelligence. It's also going to make us more resilient, right?
How
Because we
so?
don't have to. I think because we don't have to figure out everything just by ourselves.
Yeah.
And in business, most corporate environments have subject matter experts, generalists, and a hybrid of those. And I think very often, if we want to listen into the intelligence of the system, bringing people together from different areas allows us to be more creative, because there are going to be people that have different priorities, different concerns, different knowledge, different ways of thinking. And if they bring that, knowing that that will be valued, I think we have our carrying capacity as an organization or a team actually gets higher. But we have to dare to be not wrong, but be not knowledgeable.
And
And
presumably it leads to better decision making, more accountability.
so.
That there's a lot of
Yeah,
virtuous stuff
definitely.
that comes out of this, right?
Yeah, and more ways of maybe working together smartly and understanding what that looks like. Yeah, for sure.
I like the idea of working smarter, not harder.
Yes.
Yeah.
Always.
But I like the way that could create, the human mycelium that we now understand that is embedded in the trees. And, fundamentally as humans, I think there's lots of ways that we already communicate with each other that we don't understand. The rapport building and all of that stuff that can happen when you're in a room, even virtually with people,
For
where
sure. Yeah.
there's so much communication happening between us. And I think that, starting to harness that and open ourselves up to it more will enable us to, make better decisions, find better solutions. And particularly as we start to move into the AI world, where a lot of processing and stuff can get done, by the computers, and we can get all of that. But there must be something that us as humans, joining up dots from disparate places, that maybe we never realized existed, will really come into play. And, from that perspective, I think that's where there's a real power potentially for us.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we think about AI, I don't think it's an either or. I think we have to dispense with the very kind of binary sense of, the computers are coming to take over everything. I think we have to put our human spirit over what comes from AI. But, AI is also all of our collective wisdom put into a system that then spits it out. And, I did some article research recently, and it would have taken me 2 weeks to try and assemble all that information all at once. So I think if we use it wisely, understand what is it that we're trying to ask, and then put our human soul over it, because whatever came out I would never have used directly, because that didn't make sense. And I think we have, we're more than our physical bodies, right? We have lived experience, we have ancestral knowledge, we have we have a creativity and hope for the future that is just not necessarily scoped out and ready made. And I think the more we can combine the two, I think they coexist well. And then maybe, thinking about the fact that when we use AI, they sit in data centers that generate tons of heat. So AI is also a drain on our natural resources, such as water.
So we should use it wisely.
Use it wisely is what I would say. But again, there's probably ways to resolve that and find ways to use the technology in ways that are just more sustainable over time. We're doing that with fuel right now, hydrogen, electricity, hybrid fuels, all sorts of things. So there's always a way, isn't there?
Some exciting stuff going on in the world, isn't there? They're trying to solve these problems that we're collectively facing.
Yeah, and not just be, if we think about, obviously a lot of the regenerative movement is also about care for the planet. But there are also, factions out there that want you to think that there is no hope. I personally don't believe that at all. But I think we have to remember that, we can all contribute in a way that is, adds to the bounceability and the resilience of all of us in a good way.
Well, Tatjana, I'd like to thank you for your contribution today to our podcast. You've brought up some very thought-provoking concepts and ideas and some solutions as well that I think people can really take away with them to help them with their own resilience and that of the teams that they lead or are part of. So thank you very much for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
No, so much.
And good luck with the human greenhouse.
Yeah,
we look forward to
hearing
more.
Yes, it's experimental for sure, but lots of fun.
All the best things are.
Thank you. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, we'll see you soon. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.